So here we are again. We're going to talk about Dad's career as a madman today. So we're going to go back to when Dad just got out of high school and first started working for what, Saturday Night Press?
Saturday Night Press, yes.
And
as a clerk.
Clerk, so you just carried papers around and stuff?
I had a desk.
Yeah.
My official designation was clerk. That meant you could do anything. Somebody said, do this, you did it.
Of course, before that, when you were in high school, you worked at the movie theater, right?
At high school, movie theater.
Was it the Odeon?
The Odeon was just around the corner from us on Queen Street. We lived on Dowling Avenue.
Right.
And it was a small theater run by an Italian family.
Right.
One of the brothers managed it on a full-scale basis, and another showed up every so often with a huge mastiff dog. It was quite exciting.
And what did you do there?
I ushered and took tickets at the door.
Right. So.
And spoke kindly to the projectionist, who was a nice man, and let me hang out in the projection room.
And so did you get to see a lot of movies that way?
I got to see everything that was fit to print. I mean, I got everything that was released eventually came through our doors, I guess,
right.
Or through our projector.
So when you were at Saturday Night Press, you just decided that you might want to get into the advertising business.
That's a good question to which I'm not sure what the answer really is.
Well, I thought you started doing some marketing at Saturday Night Press and then
well, I was not
got interested.
I was totally unschooled, as it were. I had a job as a clerk, or clerk, as we once said, and I did what I was more or less told. But I got to be working in the promotion department. That's how it...
Okay.
That was the big break.
Right.
I got attached to this gentleman who ran the promotion for the various magazines that Saturday Night Press published, and therefore had my first taste of advertising.
Right.
And he was a nice man, and we got along just great.
And so that gave you the idea that you might want to be in the business.
No, it didn't give me any ideas at all. I think I just was sitting there when the account guy from the advertising agency for some reason started talking to me about I ought to try and get a job at the advertising agency. That Saturday Night Press had an advertising agency. I had not thought about it really, but he was and I don't know why he picked on me, but he said I should ask at the advertising. Yeah, I did. I went and talked to the advertising agency, and they said that handled Saturday Night Press, and they said that if I worked in the mail room for 6 months satisfactorily, they would take me at the end of that trial period and teach me to be an account executive in advertising agency business.
But there's a whole story before that. So this is Spitzer, Mills, and Bates, right?
Yes.
And they didn't want to hire you at first.
Jack Spitzer and Mills and Bates was, I never knew Bates, but...
Frank Mills.
Frank Mills and Jack Spitzer, I didn't know.
So who was the one that you were writing to every 2 weeks for 3 years?
Oh, no, I was writing, neither of them. There was a guy who hired and fired.
So they could work for them.
And so I just... I had a meeting with him saying I wanted to get a job, and he said, not likely, and or something to that effect.
Right.
And then so I decided to keep in touch with him, and it took me 3 years before he threw up his hand. Yes, it's quite right. Every 2 weeks I either saw him, talked to him on the phone, or sent him a piece of material of some sort that I had dodged up.
Right.
So I was in touch with him for every 2 weeks for 3 years. He finally said he gave up, and he would hire me if I would work in the mail department for 6 months. And if I was satisfactory in that respect, he would bring me across to the big office, because all the services were in the cheap rent district in The advertising, the agency itself was in the high rent where the clients might come into the door or something
Right.
like that.
Right.
On King Street, somewhere. Anyway, so I got to work, and they had this little office about 5 blocks away in the cheap rent district, where it was lovely fun for me. I wasn't very old, and the people were great. And we did the scheduling and booking of time and space, and checked ads in the department to see if they'd actually run and if they'd run them properly or not in the various magazines and places.
And is that where you worked with the woman that spoke about 7 different languages?
No. I was working in the. Think about that. I think that's probably true. I met. It was just after the war, and this lovely Polish woman had migrated to Canada. She'd lost her whole family in the war. Her husband and everybody that mattered to her. But she had survived, and then somehow got on a Canada quota,
Right.
and ended up in Canada. And she spoke English as well as Polish and about 3 other languages at least. I forgot how many.
Mm-hmm.
Which I discovered later on in life. Most Europeans spoke at least 3 languages that I knew.
Right.
They spoke their native language. They spoke English because everybody spoke English, and you could get all through. You could travel. You traveled. Oh yes, you traveled on English in those days in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
You could go to any country and book yourself into a hotel and everything in English. So you could travel in English. It was referred to as. Yes.
So you spent your 6 months in the mailroom, and then they transferred you over.
I did my stint in the mailroom, and they were quite good about it. They did move me over to the main office. They were going to teach me how to be an account executive, and it was an agency that did not have a creative department. It had artists, but not writers. All the account guys wrote their own ads, and then the artists sort of drew them up into pictures of sorts that they could make an ad out of in a magazine or a newspaper.
Right.
So I worked for a wonderful senior account guy who was just absolutely marvelous man. He taught me all that I ever learned really about advertising, because he was very nice and very smart and had been in the business for quite a while, and it was genuinely interested in helping me make a transition. So he made every opportunity possible for me to be in learning moments in the agency. Gave me things to do that would teach me things.
Right. Do you remember any of the accounts that they had?
Offhand, I can't think that I do.
So you weren't there that long, a couple of years or something?
Yeah, a couple of years, until I learned a lot more about the industry itself and realized where the opportunities might lie. Also discovering that where my strengths in advertising lay. I discovered I was more creative than handshaker.
Right. You weren't a suit.
I wasn't a suit. I was a suit, but I discovered that I was better at creating. The suit stuff was all right, but the real guts of advertising, the real product of advertising is the creative.
Mm-hmm.
I discovered that I could do that kind of work, and that's where I aimed myself. And when I got to move from that agency, I went into the creative department at J. Walter Thompson. I think that was
right. And they're big.
They were a
Very
worldwide
big,
agency,
yeah.
but they had a creative department. And I got hired into it and a couple of accounts to do creative work on. And we had an amazing man who was the head of the creative. He was, how do I describe him? I think he liked to create pain. I've forgotten his name, but I watched him with all the people that he had in the creative department under his wing, and the ones that were most vulnerable, he really and truly would make them work nights, and it was nasty to them. I don't know why he wanted to be nasty to them. But I took that in my stride as a young guy. I didn't care if he was being nasty or not.
Mm-hmm.
And but I learned that I could write advertising.
Right.
And I discovered that advertising agencies, the product was the advertising that was created, and therefore it wasn't bad if I could be a writer. It was good. And the advertising was created by writers and artists.
Right.
And the account guys, all they did was maintain some relationship with the client.
So did you go straight from J. Walter Thompson to McCann?
A good question. I'm not sure I know the answer,
Mm.
but I think I did.
Yeah. And of course, that's where your great blossoming was.
Well, it turned out I could do the work really well, and not only that, but the clients discovered I could really do the work, and they liked that. I got to work on, guess what, Coca-Cola.
Right, so the Coca-Cola account, which...
And the Coke people, it wasn't normal, but I got to go to the agency. The account guy discovered that he could safely take me to the client, and I wouldn't embarrass him.
Mm-hmm.
And I could talk about the creative a lot better than he could.
Right.
So he made a rather sensible decision to take me along with him, and that gave me account exposure to client,
Mm-hmm.
and found that that was sort of rewarding on both sides. They liked me, I liked them, and they liked talking directly to the creative person rather than trying to filter it through the account guy.
Right.
As it turned out.
Mm-hmm.
So that benefited me, and so I became a creative director eventually in advertising. So I was in charge of the basic product of advertising for a number of clients, who whatever they were for that agency. The account guys are nice and maintain a relationship with the client, but the real work was being done in the creative department somewhere.
Right. But Coca-Cola was sort of the biggest account you had, right?
Well, Coke was, of course, a worldwide account.
Right.
And the the manager of the that I saw at my level, we got to be quite friendly. He liked to be able to talk directly to the person who's creating the advertising,
Right.
instead of trying to filter it through another mouth. So we got to be quite friendly. I spent a lot of time, and then I made presentations. It turned out that I was good at presenting stuff to clients, so I would do the work, and then I would do the presentation, which meant a lot of clients who were in the room getting
Mm-hmm.
presented to at various times.
So was D. Ito working for McCann?
Dee was in the New York office
Okay.
of McCann,
Mm.
and we Coca-Cola was an international account, so we got to work on she worked on Coke in the U.S., I worked on Coke in Canada. We got to meet at some point,
Right.
and
And you met Marshall at some point.
and Marshall, yes, indeed. Marshall did artwork.
Well, he still does. He's
He's a marvelous artist.
Yeah, so he's a quite well-known artist, and he's done.
But back then he wasn't so quite well known.
Well, he did commercial art. He
He
did.
he was a commercial artist. He did all kinds of.
He did like Time magazine covers.
That's
and
right.
stuff.
No, he was a very good, well-respected source for commercial art for magazines and stuff. He was doing very well for himself back when I first met him. But and he was a lovely man, and he was a lovely person.
And there was one time, I guess you and Dee were in Paris, and
Well, we had to go to. Yes, we had to travel internationally on Coca-Cola. we went to presentations and things in Europe and stuff. So we got to be in Paris together and stuff. She was a lovely person to have around for dinners and things. And,
but one time she couldn't get in touch with Marshall.
I remember that. She was, I found her sobbing. I hadn't seen her. I knocked on her door. And she was in a terrible state. She couldn't find Marshall anywhere. She'd been phoning everywhere. Didn't know what had happened. They'd only been married for about 6 weeks or something. Mm-hmm. At that point, they were very brand new married people. And so as I like to say, I soothed her savage brow. She was so upset. Mm-hmm. I got her to sit down and take a deep breath and have a coffee or something, and finally get her wits back. She was just totally wrecked.
But Marshall was out trying to find them an apartment or something.
No, the whole thing was she couldn't get in touch with Marshall because he was indeed traipsing around New York trying to find a place for them to live. And it was not easy then. I mean, at any time in life has it ever been easy to find a place to live in New York. But that was his purpose, and he was not answering his phone, and it was very upsetting to her.
Anyway, they're still around. I got to meet them a few times in New York.
Well, I got to be friendly with them. They were just such nice people. And when I was in New York, I often stayed at their place instead of a hotel and mm-hmm. things, and that was really nice. I and the cat had to sleep in the same bedroom. That's the only thing.
Right.
They had a vicious cat, and I'm sure they would admit to the fact that Dee used to put on oven mitts whenever she had to approach this cat.
And you may remember that every Christmas, their Christmas card, they made up a story about the cat.
Well, you see, the cat was a big thing in their life. It's true, they did. They did Marshall, I think, made it up, and he would draw tremendous pictures about featuring the cat in some situation or other where he was killing somebody probably. But they were such a nice couple of people. I loved them both, and saw as much of them as I could when I was in New York.
And eventually, Marshall did the cover for your book that you wrote.
Well, I wrote a book. That's
called
right.
Near Death on Nantucket.
I tried my hand at novel writing, and I needed a cover, and Marshall agreed to do it for me.
Right, so that was great.
Which was quite nice because he did a fantastic cover.
And we had some T-shirts made up with the cover of it.
You had what?
We made a T-shirt with the cover, and then I took it to them. So.
That's right. No, that's right. I remember that. We used the art to create T-shirts, yes, featuring the book, Near Death in Nantucket.
Exactly. So, because this is back in the 1960s, and you were traveling all around the world making commercials for Coke and I guess for other things as well.
Yes. I got to have a fortuitous life because traveling around the world is recommended if you can do it.
So I know a few of them. I know you were in Grenoble making commercials for the Winter Olympics.
That's right. They were skiing. I went to I don't know what number Olympics, mm-hmm. But it was the year before the.
Right, the year before, so you were making the commercials.
And so we were making all the commercials so we could put on as if we were at the actual event the next year.
Right.
And that was